This is episode 200 of the Gold Squadron podcast, and we're coming to you live here. Looking forward to having a good time. I'm joined by Marcel, old-fashioned or just old, Manzano?
It's a question I ask myself every day. Old-fashioned today, old tomorrow.
That's right. Will, new extinguisher Haywood.
Oh, it's getting hot in here. Better be ready.
Ryan, now what? Staniszewski.
Yeah, we had 200. Now what? Just keep on trotting along. Who knows?
And Max, the creator, or one of the creators? We're in 2.0. We're going to call him the creator. At least 50% of the team there. Brooke.
That's generous. I would say Frank is really the creator on 2.0, and I was just lucky to get to help him on it. But but I did write the sort of second edition translations for most of the first edition cards while Frank was creating an Ironclad rules reference. So.
Really?
There you go.
I got a bone to pick with you later, buddy.
Oh, I'm sure you have many.
A specific
I'm
one.
sure you have many, and they're fair.
Marcel, why do you fight with everyone, man?
we bring on a guest. First thing, fight me. He just immediately goes for the
To
throat.
be fair, he's the first person I ever talked to. He probably doesn't remember because he talks to a lot of people, but he's the first person I talked to from FFG. It was in an email. Well, it was an email back and forth. He was helping me build a card that did not get translated into 2.0.
I know, I'm sorry.
And it got released like a month and a half before 1.0 died.
I know, I'm sorry. I feel really bad about that. The 1.0, 2.0 split there did not work out perfectly, so my heartfelt apologies. I have few regrets on X-Wing, but I'll put that on the short list.
There you go.
He's on the nice list again.
Rest in peace, thrust corrector. We hardly knew you.
Dude, you killed the trivia.
People got to pay
The
attention.
point is for them to pay attention.
That's right. You spoiled it, in fact. Anyway, actually, did thrust corrector come in the U-wing? Was it the Saw's Renegade, or was it?
I'd have to look that up. Let's see.
I think it was the
G1A, I think, right?
It was the Saw's Renegade.
No,
I think.
it's picture the G1A, yeah.
Dude, you're killing the other trivia.
All right.
Stop saying it's part of trivia. That's all you got to do.
It was
If you stop saying it's part of trivia, people just like, whatever.
Anyway, I had the Reaper package next to me. I was like, wait a second, let me bust that open, see if it's in there. Sad, I don't have the relic with me. Anyway, first, thank you for everybody who's tuning in live and watching later. Thank you for being a part of our 200th episode celebration. What's going to happen is we're going to be hanging out here from a while with Max. We're going to have some conversations, talk about X-Wing, past, present, future, also just game design. Max has done some awesome work creating some articles just talking about game design. And we just have some different questions we're going to ask him. We do have some patron questions that were collected as well. And by the way, he did an awesome interview with Fly Better a couple of weeks ago. And what we did is we actually went through and took notes on that show to try to. There's some things that we're going to try to expand on that were brought up in there. But I would highly suggest, think about this as like a part 2, a second conversation with Max Brooke. That way he can, he can continue to dive a little deeper. We can get to know him just a little bit more. And Max, we're gonna dive into it here. Tell us a little bit about you. Like all we know of you is he's a guy that helped develop X-Wing. But I want to know Max. Like where are you from, man? What's something you love? Let me know a little bit about you.
So I was born out in California, lived out there for a long time. And then when I was about 11 or 12, we moved to Boston. So I lived there for a while. So I lived on both of the coasts. I'd never lived in the Midwest until I took the job at Fantasy Flight. And when I took the job, they said, are you willing to move to Minnesota? And then I said, well, that's where the job is. So yes, definitely. So I've only been in the Twin Cities since then. With that said, that's actually been over 9 years now. which is a pretty long run. And I'm still out in the Twin Cities, definitely staying. Really like it out here. Yeah, let's see. I don't know. What else is there to know about me? My background's actually more in RPGs than minis games prior to X-Wing, though at this point, because I've done so much X-Wing, a lot of my resume is minis games. But I actually joined Fantasy Flight as an RPG producer, so as a project manager for RPGs. I played a lot of minis games, and I helped out with Dust Warfare. And so, when there was sort of an opening on X-Wing and they really wanted to get some fresh voices in there and have, Alex and Frank were obviously doing a really good job with First Edition, carrying it forward, but they had also done a lot of First Edition and they wanted to do absolutely anything else for a little while.
We're a little needy, so I get it.
So I jumped in to help with that. I also helped out with Armada at various times. I had some involvement in that too. Can't say I did much on Legion, but I watched it admiringly from afar. And I might have helped with some puns and flavor text or something. I don't know. But yeah, so my background in games is RPGs, minis, all that stuff. I've played a lot of card games and I'm really bad at them. Played a lot of Magic back in the day, not good at it. But yeah, so I've played a lot of different board games, but I'm not a serious board gamer in the way like a lot of folks I know are, where they know every new Euro that's come out and they know all these things, and I'm like way behind on that stuff. I don't know. It's a fast-paced world. So I try to keep up as best I can, but I often feel like, well, I know minis really deeply, so that's a good area of expertise. And yeah, so for minis games, I played a lot of Warhammer 40K back in the day. I still play it sometimes. I played a fair amount of Dust Warfare when we were doing that. I don't know if anyone here played that, but it's a lot of Legion's DNA is Dust Warfare. When Alex was designing Legion, he was really looking back to his time on that. And then when I came onto X-Wing, they needed someone who knew Star Wars. They needed someone who knew minis games, and I fit the bill. So I got pulled onto it and thrown into the deep end. And it's been a wild ride.
Awesome. Well, we have a list of questions here, but you know what? Something a little rare. I know that you're a guest, but one thing that I've always wondered is obviously you guys don't design in a vacuum. We know that you guys literally had somebody at FFG, community manager, involved in the FFG forums, Facebook posts, all that. But this might be a little, it's our 200th episode, so I'm gonna strut a little bit, at least just a little bit, because I have a question. I always wondered, there's Gold Squadron. We've been around for a while. We've done a lot of broadcasting of the meta, and one of the things I've always wondered is, especially lately with COVID-19 and of course that destroying organized play for last year, most of this year, and then things switched to digital X-Wing, right? Which we know that which was awesome. I heard that you were commentating on, I think it was a Swedish Nationals event, which was awesome.
Yeah, they were nice enough to have me on.
We're gonna have to have you for the upcoming series. We're gonna have to have you now. You got your chops going.
I'd love to be there.
So my question, okay, and now of course, note to the audience, okay, there's definitely stuff that Max can't talk about, and Max, you let us know if we start going towards that line. Dion, stop. You got to tell me to stop, okay? All right. So
Dion, you're doing so much dancing. Stop dancing.
I'll stop dancing. Okay, here's the question. So in October. In November 6th and 7th, we had the Galactic Championship online. This was this whole multiple months worth of qualifiers. But in October, there was a magical points update. Absolutely magical, that saved us from the oppression of the Nantex. And
I'm glad you like that one.
Right? Yes, we did. So I guess my question was, in take it away from Galaxies, like there was a lot of online playing happening around the community. Was that something that was, I guess, in discussions for making decisions for the game when you had no other data?
I mean, so for starters, you know, there was never any like separation between the community and the playtesting pool, because of course many people who are playtesters are also members of the community. So the people who give us the data to work with were also aware of these things and certainly weighing in on that and playing in these events. So even if I hadn't been paying any attention to them, I would have been receiving the feedback from these events from the people who I liaised with to do that. I was certainly looking at online play at the time. You know, my feeling was I'm not going to make big balance changes around online play, but on the other hand, it's the play that's going on. So, you know, let's do what we can for it. So I wasn't specifically thinking about the timing of that event to that points change. That was just sort of like, well, we know people want the Nantex change. Let's just pull the trigger on it now. It's a good time to do it. People will be happy. I'm glad it worked out for that. I didn't specifically plan that out or anything, but I'm glad it worked.
In my heart, I just believe you knew. It was just the connection, man.
Maybe subconsciously. But yeah, so online play, I mean, it's something that, you know, as a company, we couldn't really react to one way or another, but, you know, I can say as an individual, I'm really glad people are doing it. You know, we've got a global pandemic on. It's not a good time to go to your local game store and play X-Wing, unfortunately. And I'm so glad to see people, you know, playing the game, keeping the, you know, competitive scene alive. So that's fantastic.
That, I would say, that's really comforting to hear. That's nice to hear, because a lot of people have really been relying on that X-Wing interaction in some way to get through all this, which is great. All right, I'm going to pass it to Ryan. It's Ryan's turn.
So back in the old times of actually playing in physical events, it seems that the first year of second edition competitive events leading up to the very first Worlds of second edition was actually very well received by the community. The structure of it, and potentially the belief that it might have been one of the best OP structures that was made in X-Wing up to that date. From your perspective and discussions you had with your coworkers, how did everyone within FFG feel as the year went on and culminated at Worlds? Did you have any type of discussions in total as to why it worked so well and what you ideally wanted to build upon its success until obviously COVID happened?
So that is a question you should take to someone like Alex Watkins, Matt Holland, or Jimmy Lee. Because those folks were all in charge of that. Mostly, you know, we'd liaise with OP, we'd talk about stuff, we'd plan things out, but I trusted their good judgment, and they always handled things well, I thought. I didn't weigh in much on the like structure of OP. It's not, you know, tournament organization is super interesting to me, but it's not something I'm actually a particular expert on. I know that they felt really good about it. I knew that they had a like strong plan they liked. I can't say I had much of a hand in it, except the occasional like, you know, oh, hey, what do you think about this card in hyperspace? They'd give me some feedback on it because they had great, you know, like contact with the community and all that. But at the end of the day, yeah, my involvement in that was minimal, but it also, you know, seems like they were doing a really awesome job. And I'm sure if you had a chance to talk to one of them, they could elucidate on that topic a bit more.
Yeah, I knew you weren't focused on OP. I just didn't know from your perspective what it felt like, if it was any more more positive feelings more that past year than previous ones.
I noticed a lot of positivity in the community. You know, Matt and Jimmy and Alex are all X-Wing players. You know, they're all, you know, they were all very enthused about the game. I assume that helped a lot. You know, it was good to have people who were, you know, like they were really, for the last, you know, year or so, they were kind of able to really focus on like X-Wing and Legion and not have to worry about dealing with as much stuff from the board and card side that had, you know, split into its own studio. And I think that helped, having, you know, like a better singular focus. Yeah. But I unfortunately I can't offer any great insights on what they were doing well, because honestly, you'd probably know better than I do.
I think, Will, you're up next.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into one of the expansions you had done for X-Wing, which was the Epic Battles. One of the very few second edition official game modes that did have objectives. I really wanted to pick your brain on essentially how did you go about designing objectives in X-Wing, and why do you think that we don't have objectives in standard play?
So objectives in standard play, I'll come back to that. So I went about designing objectives for Epic Battles. Objectives for Epic Battles had to fulfill really two functions. One, they had to make the game end in a set number of turns, or at least a reasonable. The game had to progress towards ending, because the biggest problem. So I like surveys. I surveyed a bunch of players and playtesters at the start of when I was working on Epic Battles, and I said, "What do you not like about Epic Battles? Why do you not put it on the table in first edition? Why do you not play Epic games?" And the answer was pretty much across the board, like, it takes too long. So the number one thing objectives had to do was get game time to a manageable length. And so you'll notice a lot of those objectives really push you towards either like, oh, there's things that get destroyed, and once they're all gone, the game ends. And so you don't have to wipe out your opponent's fleet, because that could take like an hour after the game is pretty much clearly decided, but like we're mopping up the last of their ships. So that was one thing they had to do. The other thing they had to do was evoke, cinematic, awesome space battles in a narrative way. And so when I went about designing them, I just thought about the coolest space battles in Star Wars and other media. I'm a big sci-fi fan. I've been going through all of Star Trek recently. My real big fandom is actually Gundam. So sci-fi space battles are a thing I really enjoy, and so I just went through okay, what are some of the coolest battles? Oh, well, the battle where Amuro Ray has to pilot the Gundam through the atmosphere while fighting a bunch of Zaku's off. That's an awesome battle. Let's do something with an atmospheric entry. Oh, this battle from Stargate where they had to deal with this particular objective. So I went through and thought of all the coolest space battles, and then I tried to translate those into game modes, because I figured if it resonated with me, other nerds would like it too. So the second part of the question, why no objectives in standard play? It's something we've experimented with a bunch of times. We have put it out to the playtesters. We put it out to the playtesters in first edition. We've put it out to the playtesters in second edition. There was never a form of it that I felt strongly confident was better than the game as is. Because the tricky thing with objectives, and you see this a lot in Armada, if you follow Armada, the tricky thing with objectives is that they are harder to balance than just shooting each other to death. And even very slight issues in balance can have these really wide-ranging effects. But the other thing we found was that although there's a portion of the player base that wants them, I would estimate that the portion of the player base who feels strongly that competitive X-Wing should have objectives is 30%, at least at the time of my polling. The portion that feels strongly that it shouldn't have them is a little more than that. And then there's a lot of people who kind of don't care. So they'd have been a change that would have a small number of people would have really liked, but a large number of people would have been ambivalent about. And a basically equally large number to the people who would have liked it would have hated it. And so they were the sort of thing that I think if I'd continued designing X-Wing, I probably would have experimented with in future extended or hyperspace seasons, whichever one wasn't the competitive track. Maybe try them for a season and see if people like them. That's the great thing about a seasonal model. And so if, I said on a stream at least once, so I'll go back to this, that I want hyperspace to get weird. So, hopefully AMG does something with that. They might well. Maybe we'll see objectives in a hyperspace or extended season at some point. I wouldn't be surprised. They've certainly done enough objective stuff with Marvel Crisis Protocol. I can't meaningfully speculate, but I think it's a thing that could be done. It could be pretty cool if they wanted to do it. If they don't want to do it, they probably have the same good reason we didn't, which is it's really hard to implement properly, and we just never felt confident saying, okay, we're doing this for a season, and we're committing to it, because every time we had specific scenarios that we were testing, some people really hated them. But I think the way to do it, if it was going to be implemented, would be in either a single event where it's like, hey, it's a one-time event, we're trying this out, and see if people like it and get the data from that, because you're going to get way more useful data from that than from even a large amount of internal play testing, because as soon as you take something out to an event, you get the whole internet commenting on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and
yeah,
kind of piggyback off of what you said there, the feeling on objectives, I was actually on a team that made like a community set of objectives. It was myself, the Crates, and Fly Better. We put out a set of 12, and there was a lot of lip service to it. Oh, we're so excited, and nobody ever played it.
That's the tough thing with competitive games. It's hard to break people out of their habits, and one of the nice things about epic battles that I think really made it work was that, like you pick out the thing and then you build your list for the scenario. So you don't build a list that's just like useless in the scenario. One of the tough things in Armada is that you can end up with lists that are really bad in some scenarios. And then you end up with some very strange sort of like bidding mind game stuff where it's like, oh, if I get this scenario, I actually want to not fight my opponent and just fly away from them the whole time. And like Armada has had to deal with a lot of challenges around that. So it's not an easy thing to implement. And I think we would certainly have experimented with it eventually, or at least I would have kept trying it. And if it kept bouncing off the playtest pool, so be it. But
does that ever affect how you're designing ships or cards, knowing that they would never be focused on objectives, that it'd purely be deathmatch ships?
Well, I think that it wasn't a change was the thing, because first edition had been entirely deathmatch, except for the scenarios printed in products that nobody played. I know a few people played them and care a lot about them, and to those people, I'm sorry we took them out. But I polled a bunch of people before we stopped printing those, and the numbers were pretty abysmal. Nobody really seemed to play them. So it was how we were doing things. So it actually would have been more difficult, I think, to start shifting our design toward objectives. But there are some cards in upcoming expansions that actually play towards epic objectives. And were there ever objectives in a standard game, they would interact with them too, presumably. So it's a space we were exploring. Another thing, another space that is explored in some of the upcoming stuff, as you've seen, is, like more stuff for epic battles, more stuff for non-standard play. There was the hyperspace ring. And, that was a space that, Brooks, Fluger-Levitt, and I especially were really excited to delve into, because there are a lot of folks who play but aren't that, focused on the tournament game and just, enjoy kitchen table games and, make up their own objectives or figure out their own battle orders or play different point values. And we wanted to do more stuff without losing focus on the competitive scene. We wanted to do more stuff that was like exciting for folks who were playing at the kitchen table too.
Yeah, those are a lot of the new command upgrades that are pretty much exclusive to the epic battles.
Exactly.
All right. Silence means me. So you talked about this a little bit with Dion's question, and even a little bit with Will, but when it comes to like rules changes, rules clarifications, point adjustments, and things like that, how much where did you get your input? You talked about some of the playtesters, but where else did you dig for input for, I'm talking about specifically things like the UK group or the Fly Better Facebook page, podcasts like this one or some of the other ones that are out there, of official tournament results, but also the unofficial tournament results, the forums, and then of course things like just general social media like Reddit and stuff like that. So just wondering like where you pulled all of your what all your data points were, and then like what contributed to them. I don't know if you want to, I don't think you can actually have like a breakout of like 20%, 20%, 20%, but just like what weighted more in your input to, again, do rules clarifications when you're doing the FAQs, or point adjustments for, whenever, not the emergency ones, I think the emergency, but just general like every 6-month point adjustments?
So pretty much everything you listed was a source we used for data. Yeah, we wanted information wherever we could get it. So, we were looking at pretty much everything. I would say that if there's sort of a hierarchy, like tournament results, official and unofficial, were probably, near the top of that. We tended to weight in-person tournaments a little higher than online tournaments because I do think there's some difference of behavior in online tournaments. There are certain lists that I think aren't as much of a problem in person that tend to crop up more online because people just don't want to buy 8 copies of some ship or something, or don't want to manage it on the table because I've played on TTS plenty, and it is a lot easier to fly some lists on TTS than it is in person with your shaky hands after 5 games. In-person tournaments, official and unofficial, were probably sort of the that was always the proof is in the pudding, right? People can hate something, and people hating something is potentially a reason to change it. We did change things because people really just found them so miserable to play against from time to time. But generally, the reason we changed things was because they were actually verifiably performing well. And generally, we weren't trying to push things out. We were just trying to make other options, more attractive by comparison. So all those sources were very useful for data. I would say at the end of the day, there's no substitute for does it win? But that certainly was, not the only place we pulled information from. And we weren't only looking at quantitative stuff too, understanding what is the discourse, what are the, qualitative valuations people are making is significant. There were definitely times where we look at the quantitative data and the qualitative data and they'd be oddly out of whack. And, in cases like that, you have to sort of say well, is it okay if Darth Vader's a little too good quantitatively, but qualitatively everybody seems happy? Maybe he only goes up a point instead of going up 2 points or 3 points, and so it's a balancing act. There's a sort of art element to it, because in first edition, the thing people hated most was that Darth Vader was terrible. That or auto thrusters. So, it's not an easy thing. And because it's a theme first game, there are considerations beyond just trying to achieve perfect balance. If it was Twilight Imperium Wing, we might have been more willing to say, well, yeah, people like this Hakan guy, but, we're going to make the Space Lions a little worse this time around. But 40% of players play Empire or something. So, the most iconic Imperial character, we don't want to make him just okay. He should be, but if he's going to be good, then he has to be a little better than average. So it's this tricky thing to manage.
So that's actually pretty interesting, and I like the fact that you said qualitative and quantitative, and also just not what's winning, but what's being played, which I personally love, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because something isn't winning, if it's getting played enough, it probably doesn't need any love because people are enjoying it and they're playing it. And this is me, my marketing mind, and I know you're not in marketing, but my marketing mind is, how did you go about collecting that information? I know Matt Holland was a big part of the community group, and I'm pretty sure you guys had other types of listening devices or tools helping you.
Listening devices.
Listening tools, we use Sprinkler and we use other stuff like that. Things that kind of automate all the listening and then aggregate it and give you. But what I'm saying is, just kind of curious how you get that, because you can look at what's winning, and you can have, let's say, Nantex, for example. Nantex wins every single tournament, but there's only 3 Nantex players that are playing it. They always win. But then you might have 25 people that are playing Darth Vader because they love Darth Vader. So that's kind of you can look at what's winning or what's being played. And so
Obi-Wan is actually the one who gets played and doesn't win. That is the most playedest, doesn't winest ship in the game. Delta 7 Obi-Wan.
Amen.
And every time there'd be these huge, outcries on our forums or something there's 20 pages of nerf Obi-Wan. And I'm looking at the data and I'm I don't think he deserves it. So it's funny, right? It's odd what, sort of picks up in that way and what doesn't. So, our methods were all very informal. Like, Matt Holland would report to us stuff from the, Facebook group, and he paid a lot of attention there. I mean, we'd read the public forums, we'd read the, so we were very well aware of the Jumpmaster thread. Or not the Jumpmaster thread, the Gunboat thread. We'd check other sources, Reddit and such, look at various aggregation sites. We didn't really use any traditional market research tools for balance. I don't know if marketing. I don't really know what marketing uses for their market research, so that's not a subject I'm an expert on. But it was more informal, and there wasn't really ever a marketing incentive. This is something they asked in the last one as well, but I feel I need to reiterate it. We were never told drop the points on this, we need to sell more of them. The mandate was always make a good game and it'll sell. So
that is awesome to hear. That really. That is really awesome. No, hey, we found an extra box. We found an extra box of Oopsilons.
But I'll tell you this: as a marketing mind who has done consumer products in the past, this is the way I did it to our developers, product developers. I did it just build. We did stuff for cars, not for games. Build the best thing that'll help the car out. But you know what people with cars like? Darth Vader. That's what we would do. Our market research tells us that the M13A, people love the M13A, but Kayla's making fun of me. But make the stuff that make a good game. But people love that M13A. That's the tricks of the trade.
That's funny. That's funny. All right. Well, kind of not in the same vein, but bouncing off of products that have been made on the Fly Better podcast, you got to talk a little bit about the creation of the conversion kits. Right? I will say because X-Wing was my first competitive game, and after going into a second edition, I was amazed at how some other brands, other game developers had gone about making a second edition, and to see that we got this ready-made solution. You want a faction? Here's a box. All your stuff's essentially ready to go. Now, here's my question in there. They're amazing, but let's say you had the opportunity to do a redo, right? And somebody said you got sent back in time. You could talk to Max Brooke from however many years ago that is now, saying, all right, hey, you didn't realize this. What would you change about the conversion kit?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. So the conversion kits were pretty specced out when we got to them. So the amount of product control we had varied a lot. Management wasn't telling us, oh, put this upgrade in, put this character in, whatever. But product specs were usually pretty locked in. And the conversion kits were an example of that, where the product spec was pretty locked in. So unfortunately I could go to Max Brooke at the past and tell him do this, that, or the other thing differently. But in terms of the overall spec and the way we did it, they sort of were what they were, unfortunately. And past Max Brooke would be great, I can't do anything about that.
When you say spec, are you saying all right, you have this many sheets of cardboard,
cards,
this many cards? Okay.
It's going to do these, it's going to achieve these functions, etc. We figured out all the specifics, but there was an overall thing that was okay, this is the way the product is. And that was the case on a lot of things. The core set was hey, it's going to be this, and so again, depending on the product, we'd have more or less input. Sometimes we'd sort of put forward a pitch. Other times it was more hey, here's a thing. But for the conversion kits, there was a plan, that people had come up with from above to do the edition shift over, and mostly I think it was a decent plan. So all I can really speak to is the specifics of the cards we brought over. I think the one thing I would tell me of the past is just that I would just, I guess, give some information about how card design was going to change in second edition. because obviously, I was writing all those cards, and there are like a fair number of those early wave cards that are much more like first edition cards in, sort of their like design ethos. And although it's sort of a chicken egg problem where like second edition changed because those existed, but there's stuff like supernatural reflexes is obviously just, off the chain good. But in first edition, it would have been pretty good, it wouldn't have been great. I don't think it would have been like a top tier card.
It doesn't matter where you go when there's a TLT out there. Exactly.
but in second edition, obviously, like too good. It's one of the few cards we sort of printed a replacement for in precognitive reflexes. And so, I guess there'd be some of that, right? Like there are some, like things that are tuned in a way that like I didn't know at the time, but it would have been nice to know, like, oh, like this is going to cause problems, or maybe throw charges on advanced sensors or something. But in general, it's mostly like small tactical stuff. It's not like, I'll do everything differently. I'm actually surprised there aren't more landmines in the early cards.
All right, I got to get you to throw somebody under the bus though. Caption Rex. Whose fault is it?
That was my fault. That was my fault.
He lays down his own life for his friends. I like it.
That was my fault. And the funny thing about that is it's like, oh, we'll fix it when we reprint it, and then didn't happen. So here we are, Caption Rex forever, I guess.
Words as written, the card doesn't work. It just doesn't work. That's awesome. Thank you for that.
That falls under the reasonable interpretation of a TO.
There you go. There you go. I think Ryan's up.
So with the new inclusion of the standardized keyword for upgrades, or the more recent one, which by the way, I find it's a really nice addition. It's for list building. It has some limitations that you have to do with your list, but you have to make choices, which I enjoy having to have that brain exercise and figuring things out. But if you're looking back at previous cards, like what would you potentially have considered putting standardized on to cards that have already been released? Like, for example, I immediately look at grappling struts and landing struts, which with the thought process, were those close to being the first cards with standardized as a keyword?
They weren't, but if Brooks had thought of it at the time I was writing those cards, they might have been. I think we'd have at least tested it. I think it probably would have been considered on many configurations. Brooks thought it up when they did, and we didn't implement it until then. So it's a really good idea. I agree. I wish I'd thought of it sooner. The short answer is, like, I think we'd have considered it on a lot of things. I'm not 100% sure we'd have done it, but I think we'd have at least looked at it, because not even for balance reasons, but purely because it is annoying to have to remember that one of them has struts and the other doesn't. Like, setting aside balance entirely, like the reason standardized exists is really not for balance reasons. It's for, I don't want to have to remember two different things reasons. And it's excellent design by Brooks.
Amen to that one.
All right, I think I'm up here. Bombs in X-Wing have changed a lot since the old days of advanced slam mine dropping on ships. In a dice game, how do you balance automatic damage and damage done outside of regular shooting?
That's an interesting question. So the short answer is that there needs to be executional difficulty and an opportunity for the opponent to counterplay. The problem with the advanced slam, and the reason I lobbied that we get rid of advanced slam bomb dropping in first edition, and I'm sorry if that was your jam, I apologize.
No, it was, but I knew it was wrong. It felt wrong.
This is bad, and I'm okay with it.
When I came onto the game, but I don't know, maybe 6 months after I came onto the game, I went to Alex and I was like, Alex, we have to get rid of this. And he was like, well, bombs have never been good before, and now they're good. And I'm like, yeah, but we have to get rid of it. It's the worst. There's no counterplay. And I convinced him. And I think I was right on that one. So yeah, key things are there has to be counterplay. There has to be an opportunity for the opponent to respond if it's going to be automatic damage. And, sometimes, that's not even enough. But I think bombs are in a decent place in second edition. They are awesome in epic battles, I will say, because there are a lot of things that don't have the ability to counterplay being bombed, like objectives and remotes and stuff like that. And because they're part of the scenario, so you have to like see that bomber coming and be like, okay, that Y-wing is going to put down a bunch of crap over here, and I need to deal with it before it gets here. But yeah, that's the big thing. There has to be opportunity for the opponent to respond if there's going to be automatic damage, and like if that response isn't rolling defense dice or whatever, or you having to roll attack dice, it's got to be some chance to get out of the way or something. So. If they're going to get you with automatic damage, they have to block you into position or, trick you into flying into the wrong place or what have you.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of bombs now roll for damage. It's not always automatic anymore.
It's generally safer. I mean, there are a few that kept the automatic damage stuff from First Edition, but, it's generally safer to give them uncertain damage. And I think like a, trade-off that Brooks and I both independently decided we wanted to muck with was the damage or strain trade-off, and I think that's a good one as well.
I like it. All right, I think back to Marcel.
Sorry, I'm sub fighting with False Tebow over here. All right, where are we? Questions. Actually, I got a good one for you. So we're asking you a whole bunch of technical questions. Give us your secret sauce type of stuff. But I want to take.
But I like the sauce, man. I like the sauce.
You
good.
keep the sauce. You're actually you don't even like the sauce. You don't even like hot sauce. I don't know what you're talking about. Like
whatever. Okay, fine.
You don't know what the jalapeno. Something a little bit more. So I would love to know what is your favorite memory in FFG, when it comes just like with you and the staff or the other employees at FFG, and then what is your favorite memory of FFG as it relates to like just interacting with the community, X-Wing specifically, because X-Wing podcast. So if it's something other than X-Wings, they can go take a hike.
So, okay, these are really good ones. So favorite memory, oh man, there are so many good ones. FFG was a wild ride. It was a great opportunity. I loved working there. It was really hard sometimes. I mean, it was an intense work environment at times, and I enjoyed it, but I definitely there were nights where you're there late and you bump into Jeremy Zwern, also there at 11:30, and you like pass on the way to make tea or whatever, and it's like, oh hey, so there's like plenty of that, but what are the memory with the staff? I mean, I think all right, it's stupid and it's not going to be funny to anyone else, but I'm going to share it because it's the first one that comes to mind. This might be the best, but it's the first one that comes to mind. I'm sitting there with like Frank and Luke and Brooks and maybe Alex and probably John Schaefer. Michael Gurnis might have been there. But I'm sitting next to Frank because Frank was just this like magnet of amazing conversations. Frank is one of the best conversationalists I've ever met because he will talk about anything and he will be engaged and interested to an incredible level. If you ever get a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with Frank Brooks, highly recommend. Great experience. And I don't know why, but I thought about like an alien species that communicated through just like spraying pheromones all over the place. And I turned to Frank and I was like, I just had my worst idea. And we just like got into the logistics of this, of what a mess this would be, like from a biological standpoint. Frank is a chemist, so he knows a lot about this stuff. And it was just like this, we were just like laughing at this like stupid idea that had come into my head for no reason. it might have come up because of discussing like some Star Wars species that does that, but we were like, what if that was their only means of communication? And it was really dumb, and we laughed really hard, and that's the sort of stuff I really miss the most. And since COVID, we've all been working from home, so I've kind of been missing that for like a year now, even though I only left the job a few months ago, just because like, working with people, good people online is great, but it's not as good as being in an office. I'm looking forward to like getting back into a shared office space. I might rent some office space around here. I have a couple other folks who are also independent these days, and just have talk to people, feel like a human being. The little things we all miss, or
That's
at
awesome.
least I miss. Best memory with the X-Wing community. I mean, I think it's got to be the last game of Worlds, the last year of First Edition, because that game, I don't normally like. It was IGs against
Imperial Aces. Palp Aces.
Imperial Aces, yeah. And it was a really great match, and the energy in the room was just incredible. And like I don't normally get really hype about sports. Like I enjoy watching sports and games and such. And when I was like marshaling X-Wing events, I always had to be like very focused and professional. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I always like walking around, looking at repaints, looking at the game, seeing what people would do. But that game just had incredible energy in the room, and everyone was excited. I don't know. That was a really fantastic experience to get to be a part of.
That's the worst answer you could have given.
No, it's not. That was the year I
Well,
took
no,
a resistance bomber and fought Simeon. He ended up beating me though, but he was the IG player.
Well, the reason I'm saying that was the worst one is because that's the year that, like 2 days before getting on my flight, I was like, I'm not going. The whole
Marcel wasn't
see about a
there.
girl. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I remember.
Yeah, you remember that I
sorry.
had to go see about a girl. It didn't work out, by the way. So
I'm sorry, Marcel.
I missed it. That was the only Worlds I missed, but it's good to hear that it was great. So I'm gonna actually flip it though. I'm not gonna let you throw anybody under the bus FFG wise, but you can throw X-Wing under the bus all you want. What was the
Clinch,
worst?
guys.
The worst experience you had with the X-Wing community? Now, it doesn't have to be an individual. Just like, what would you like to see the X-Wing community improve on? I'll turn that into a positive. Let's do that. What
Well,
would you like
joke
to see the
answer.
X-Wing
Okay. I'll give you a joke answer, and I'll give you a real answer. Joke answer. I'd like to see the community improve on finishing like finals games faster, because it is late and we are all tired, and like everybody else wants to go home. Like, just come on. No, but real answer. I think the X-Wing community is generally a really good community for games. I think it is honestly one of the less toxic game communities I've worked on. It has its faults, to be sure, but like I think that generally the vibe is pretty good. I think X-Wing and miniatures games as a whole, probably the number one thing that I see as a thing the miniatures game space needs to work on. And this is not like an any one person thing. This is everybody, starting with designers all the way down. But, I think like there aren't a lot of women at X-Wing events. And I think there's probably a degree to which can be very, or overwhelming and unwelcoming if you're sort of looking at the scene. And I don't think there's an easy single step to fix that, but I do think it's something that, the community should think about, and what are like the little steps that can be taken to make things more welcoming, or more, I don't know, just like X-Wing's not super bro-y. There are definitely, in my experience, compared with other minis games I've played, I feel like Warhammer can struggle with a bit of like excessive bro-iness that can be very like, even when it's harmless, it can kind of feel a little bit off-putting, probably. But yeah, I think that's something that like the games community is struggling with in a lot of ways right now, and I think the X-Wing community could really sort of like do a lot with. and there definitely are women who play X-Wing. I've met plenty of them, but you know, at events in particular, it's pretty white guy dominated. It's more diverse than I would have potentially feared seeing the first few events in all white Minnesota, but fortunately, I think worldwide it's actually quite a diverse community, so that's good. But
that's great answer, and I'm saying because Kayla is a player and we've had our share of complaints about treatment of, but I think it's not only women though. I think it's also kids below a certain age as well. So when you say bro, I'll say bro as well, but not bro, and because I think when Dion and I started, there was a lot less racial diversity. When Dion and I first started playing, there was definitely a lot less. I mean, that's part of the reason why we connected so well, because we were two of the only.
Hey, you're brown. Let's be friends.
Exactly. That was like one of the early reasons why we connected. It's like, wait, there's another brown person in this group. But I think that over time has like leveled out a little bit. But definitely towards women and children, you still see the weirdness where where people think they can get like a one up by saying like, oh yeah, this ship can shoot range 4. Take my word for it, you know, and thinking that there won't be any pushback, and there probably isn't any pushback because people don't want to get called out at the moment. Like, okay, whatever. So great answer. I thought you were going to throw somebody under the bus. You threw the whole community under the bus, not just one person. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? Though we can't ignore though his first answer, because your segue power, Max Brooke, is strong. Is so strong you don't even know. So. You don't even know. So we have upcoming. We're actually wrapping up a series right now of online events called the Flight Club Championships. We have players at different levels competing at different championships, and also the Gold Squadron events going forward. We basically take the OP doc, like the tournament resource, and say we're following everything on here except one rule. Is the final is 75 minutes. No more of this 2-hour final.
I'm for it.
You see? Okay, there you.
I'm for it.
We're on Team Max.
I think OP has good reasons to do things the way they did. Not really my place to disagree with them, but I'm for it. I set a standard length. Play to a standard length. It seems fine to me.
Right. Preach it, Max. Preach it. Telling you. Oh, the 2-hour final is one of those things that just you even said it. The final game, and I think the reason this my always thought is like 2-hour final. Let's make it dramatic, and the players have more time to think. Like I think that's the theory behind it, but it's a 2-hour. I've only seen one game, Max, one game where the 2 hours actually mattered. That was at LVO, Zach Bart versus Paul Olsen. That's it. No other one. That's it. One. And we've streamed a ton of games. A ton. All righty. I think, Will, you have a question. You're next.
Yeah, mine's about the Force. Force charges is one of the biggest changes to pilots and crew in the move to 2nd edition. How did that affect game design for Force using pilots, and what were really the goals set out in the introduction of Force charges?
So the Force is interesting because it very nearly happened in 1st edition. We were working on a version of the Force for 1st edition, which got subsumed into what it became in 2nd edition. So we had a chance to go through a whole iteration, and then 2nd edition got announced, and we were like, okay, great. We're not going to go make Force versions of all these pilots. That would be super annoying. Let's just fresh start. Wonderful. But we had all that development work. And so that was actually really nice because it meant that we didn't have to, figure that out while we were also figuring out linked actions and all these things, because we sort of had a general concept of how it would work. It evolved, but, at least we had a lot of dev time on it, and we knew a lot about what people liked and what people didn't. In terms of design, Force charges are one of the many levers we added to the game in 2nd edition that made design way, way, way easier. suddenly like, oh, I don't have to account for force powers and talents, where like Deadeye is this force power, but anybody can equip it, you know. It just lets you make a nice clean break, like, oh, force powers, they do this, they run on this currency. Oh, we want to make a really good effect. Oh, it costs 2 force points, you know, like you can only do it every other turn. Made design way easier. Second edition was built with the idea that we wouldn't have to have third edition ever if we didn't want to. That's not to say that it wouldn't maybe ever be the right choice to make third edition. Might happen someday, I don't know. It might be the right call. But second edition was built to have design space such that the designer would never be like, please give me a third edition or this game is going to, like, I can't make anything else. Because that was where we were approaching at the end of first edition. And I think we did a pretty good job with that. And it was through building these new levers, charges, force charges, linked actions, you know, different color actions, purple actions, stuff like that. And it's just a lot of space to play in, calculate. And yeah, at no point working on second edition did I feel like really hemmed in by the design the way first edition. I was never as hemmed in second edition as I was by like Predator existing.
No, that is great to hear. That's great to. It also seemed like, of course, this is completely outside looking in, but with those levers, it almost seemed like you guys realized some other things as like. So, for instance, charges, right? So we had just like regular, non-recurring, and recurring, and then all of a sudden we got things. It almost, from an outside perspective, is like, oh wait, what if we just put more than one arrow on there? We can recharge 2 charges a turn if we wanted that mechanic, or the arrow goes down. Like it just was like, oh duh, that's amazing.
So funny thing is multi-recurring charges, I think were planned from the start. I'm pretty sure cool. We had those as part of our plan. Because I'm pretty sure there were some Wave 1 cards I designed with multi-recurring charges, but we just decided not to do it because it was a little complicated. We were like, okay, we'll introduce it later. But negative recurring charges were another Brooks Fluger-Levitt special where they came up with those and were like, what about this? And it's like, yeah, this is a great idea. Do it. I wish we'd thought of these on day one. But I'm kind of glad we didn't introduce them on day one, because even if we'd thought of them then, we probably would have held off on introducing them until later, just because you don't want to drop too much complexity on it once, and second edition was already a lot to absorb. So
very cool. Ryan?
So if you could assign an X-Wing ship to each FFG designer, including yourself, which ship would be for each person? What represents each person, in your opinion, for these ships?
Okay, here we go. So Frank, Brooke. Well, okay, I'll go back. I'll go back and I'll go through everyone I know who did X-Wing design through first edition. So you may not know some of these people. So for Jay Little, I would assign Jay Little, did the original game design on X-Wing First Edition. Yes. Great guy, great designer. Also designed the Star Wars role-playing system that I spent years working on. So I spent a lot of time in Jay's shadow. He's great. I would say for Jay, I would give him the YT-2400, because Jay really thinks outside the box, and he's just this like powerhouse of ideas. He does stuff that is like big and impressive and flashy and hard to balance sometimes, but like super interesting and like really engaging and just like grabs you emotionally. So Corey Kanitska, I think, also did design work on the original. For Corey, I would say the Star Viper, because Corey is like really precise and careful about his designs, and like very like thoughtful, and he's always sort of like, I don't know, it just gives me that like calculating feel, because he's like good at like thinking things out and like planning for the future. For Alex, I would say the Fire Spray 31, specifically Boba Fett, because for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted the white boost on that thing to be red. And we had like an hour-long argument about whether the white boost should be red or not. And I was like, I want engine upgrade to have more reasons to exist. And he was like, I want Boba Fett to be good. And Alex is a really good designer. He has impeccable instincts for what players are going to react to, because he himself is such a good minis player and has such a strong grasp of that. and he's just got a really strong emotional intuition. But sometimes it means that he does stuff like talk me into making that boost white, and Boba Fett's just, running around knocking over everything. So he's just this unstoppable force sometimes. For Frank, I would go with the it's got to be something weird for Frank. It's probably, if Frank didn't design this ship, but it probably is the one I would give to Frank, which is the Vulture droid, because Frank loves strategies and ideas that run counter to the rest of the game, and he's really good at putting these into effect in ways that don't make you hate them, which is impressive because it's a hard needle to thread to design something that's different from the rest of the game but feels like a part of it. And Frank is really good at that. I know that's also a ship Frank really likes to fly, so that's part of the reason I would assign it to him. For Brooks, I would probably assign them the... that's tough. Brooks is a really good technical X-Wing player, very good technical designer. Maybe the TIE Interceptor. Brooks is very good at the TIE Interceptor, but with sensitive controls equipped. Because Brooks is very good at like pre-planning and thinking out like multi-step processes. And I tend to think a little bit like in a more just like free-form manner, and so we were a good team together because they'd think out these like, multi-step things, and then I could look at it and be like, okay, I think we should simplify here, here, and here because people are going to bump into these problems. And they'd be like, well, if we simplify this, it breaks this. And I'd be like, okay, so let's move this other thing instead. And so we worked well together because they have this very strong like sense of process and understanding of like how things are going to happen. For Michael Gurnis, who worked on X-Wing for a while, I would definitely assign the Jumpmaster 5000, specifically Nom Lum, because that was Mike's character in an RPG. And also because Mike likes to pick a unique thing and be good with it, and tends to gravitate towards like a challenge. And I feel like the Jumpmaster is a challenge. For myself, I don't know. I'm worse at self-reflection than I am at looking at other people, for better or for worse. Maybe the I think on the X-Wing team, I was one of our better, just like all-rounders. I didn't necessarily have just highly specialized skills. I'm not a great tournament player. I'm not super analytical. I have good analytical skills, but I'm not, like really great at math. Like, some other folks are. Frank is a chemist.
You sound like an X-Wing to me, my friend.
I was gonna say an X-Wing, or maybe I was gonna pick maybe even a little more boring and say a Kirax. I can fill any role you need me to, and I fill up points well on the squad.
Nice. All right, Marcel.
I got you. So have you ever heard of, and why is she not in the Delta 7, Adi Gallia?
Adi Gallia. So we definitely, the Delta 7 had a plethora of pilots, and Adi Gallia was certainly on the list of like, if we do more Delta 7s, would Adi Gallia be there? Yes.
So you don't have to get too deep into it. Just tell me, pilot, what initiative would you give her, 1 through 6?
Adi Gallia, probably an I-5, but we'd have to look at what Delta 7s have, because maybe Adi Gallia gets an ability that's like, some sort of effect that engages at a different value, or maybe there's some sort of thing that like makes her trickier. I'd have to go back and like dig more into the Adi Gallia corner of the extended universe to really get the characters like flavor down. With Jedi, we didn't tend to just push initiative and ability unless they were named Anakin or Obi-Wan, because they're already very good with those force points. They don't necessarily need a high initiative, and in fact, there's sort of a nice give and take if their initiative is a little lower, but then maybe they have an ability that lets them have one of the features of high initiative at the cost of force. So you've got this nice trade-off of like, oh, okay, I can like do this one thing in a way a higher initiative ship does, like I engage earlier, or I have some sort of other thing that usually is a benefit high initiative ships get, but I can get it, treat something as being in your bullseye, or I don't know, whatever else.
So you passed the test, by the way. The reason is I have no idea who Arigalia was because I didn't watch Rebels, and I just Googled. I found out that I was getting a third question. Thanks, Dion.
You're welcome.
I found out that I was getting a third question. I'm like, what are the best Delta 7 pilots? And her name came up, and I was like, oh, did I even pronounce it right? I think I did because you pronounced it.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
So
it checks out.
She came out as like number 3 in Delta 7 top pilots. That's kind of weird.
I think Arigalia, it's been a while. I think she might fly it a couple times in the Clone Wars. Is she in a video game or something?
Yeah, when I read it, it said that she was like in a video game, like a trainer in a video game, I think.
So she might have been the like trainer for your pilot in Jedi Starfighter. Let's look it up. Let's see. Behind the scenes.
I'm pretty sure we saw her in episode 1 and/or 2.
She came out like a literal human.
So
human person.
she's in Jedi.
Yeah, in episode 1, and she was a human in episode 1, I think. Not a human, like a live action actor.
Hey, there's still a chance for her to show up.
It looks like she features pretty. Yeah, who knows what the future holds? It looks like she features pretty heavily in Jedi Starfighter, so that's probably why. I know people always asked about her for X-Wing, and she again, she didn't make it in not because like we didn't like Arigalia, but just other people preempted her due to being more iconic or what have you. But given infinite time, I'm sure she will be in X-Wing.
Infinite time, here we come. Okay, so I have the last of our questions, and then we have some patron questions that we're gonna ask you. And mine's pretty simple. I want to swag you out in GSP stuff. Okay, I have to. It is the GSP way. I love giving stuff to people. It's the way I show love and appreciation is giving stuff to people. So obviously not publicly online, but give me your address and you're gonna get a care package from GSP, so you could be
that's very kind of you.
Live that
Thank
GSP
you.
Life. No problem, man.
I appreciate it. I will make sure to wear it on some streams so that you can get some of that exposure on the other X-Wing streams that already know about you.
All right. First patron question comes from Steve Smallenberg. Was match duration, which we kind of talked about a little bit, was match duration a part of your X-Wing design process? And period. Well, we'll stop the question there because that's the main part of it.
It's a good question. So yeah, it is the short answer. When we play tested, we asked players to record how long did this match take, and how did the game end? And most players tended to test at the 75-minute tournament standard. So like most of the time we'd get a report for instead of playing to the bitter end, it'd be like, hey, it's 75 minutes. This was the score. So it certainly factored into our design in a natural way that way. And anything that was like, oh, this is unkillable in 75 minutes wasn't going to go to print if we were getting that feedback. But we didn't do a lot of like concrete things to deal with it. It was more reactive. It was just like if we thought something was going to cause problems within the context of the 75-minute duration, we would deal with it. But it didn't come up much. There were only a few things over the years where it's just like, oh, this is probably too durable. And usually it's a problem anyway. And it's like pretty rare that it's pretty rare that it was causing issues. There were some like sometimes where we would look at some points threshold and it's like, oh, this list that can just run away might be too viable. You know, that was something we kept an eye on, but it didn't occupy a lot of my energy, but it was a factor.
All right, Ryan, you can go ahead and ask the next one.
All right, so this comes from Jason Grimm. Love to know if the B-Wings were balanced with 1 agility, since most common canon sources say they're known to be an agile assault fighter, or why some shuttles and heavier craft are more agile. I know a B-Wing can pack a punch, but curious on the comparison to Y-Wings and other 1 agility ships.
That's an interesting one. So that predates my time on X-Wing. I didn't start working on X-Wing until Wave 9 of first edition. So B-Wings were, well and truly settled by then. So you would have to ask. That might be James Niffen. Oh, I forgot to give James a ship. James, the aggressor assault fighter, for sure. Yeah, that would be a question for someone from before my time. Possibly even before Frank and Alex's time. That's some old lore.
So I guess I'll build on that question. Maybe to help with more current upgrade. Do you feel the new stabilized S-foils maybe more accurately represents that with the one side where it's closed, that it gives it the evade action?
I'm sure that was part of Brooks's thinking. That was a Brooks card, and Brooks's single greatest asset as an X-Wing designer, besides being just very analytical in general and thoughtful and good at taking feedback, was their deep knowledge, not just of the current canon, but also of pretty much the entirety of the EU. So I am sure they were thinking about that, because if it was a thing that was said to be true of B-Wings, I'm sure they knew it. I could not have told you that offhand, but I'm sure they were thinking about it.
All right. Will, go ahead and take the next one.
This comes from Lou the Lunatic. What do you think is the most underrated ship in X-Wing? What's the surprise gem that no one's discovered yet?
I think people are still sleeping on Victor Hell. I said it on the other podcast. I'm gonna say it here. I think people are sleeping on Victor Hell, but I also just think Victor Hell is hilarious. So, it's
with the new Cutthroat upgrade, you can get stealth devices back now.
It's true. That pack in general is going to have a lot of fun stuff for Victor to play around with, actually, because there's some other fun things I think in there too that play with that. So yeah, maybe that'll finally get him there. Does he have a talent slot?
Oh yeah, he's got a talent slot. He's I4.
Nice.
All right, well, keep a lookout, guys.
I'll go ahead and bring that card up, because I'm sure 99% of the people out there are like, Victor who? Victor
Heck, we'll say. This is a family-friendly Max. Come on now, Victor Heck.
Awesome. All right, so I'll take the next one because I believe it requires a little bit of dancing, but I said I would ask. So please feel free to tell me to stop if I need to. So I know a lot of people are a big fan of Cad Bane, and we did have a first edition Cad Bane upgrade. We never had a pilot, okay? So I guess, can I continue down this? I guess the question from the patron is, what do you think would be a cool way to see him in the game? And I guess my question before his question is, can you talk about it?
Well, the short answer is no. The longer answer is I'm pretty sure I designed first edition Cad Bane. He's the one who lets you boost after a bomb, right?
Yep.
That's the second edition ability.
I really like Cad Bane and was excited to find opportunities to put Cad Bane and stuff. And, I know that other people on the team felt the same way, because Cad Bane is really cool. So
he's got a cool hat, man. He's got a cool hat. Who doesn't like his hat?
He's got a cool hat. But yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of future products, but everybody likes Cad Bane.
That's right. So I've confirmed. This was from Steve Wagstaff. Cad Bane not hated, confirmed is what we know.
Cad Bane liked, confirmed.
All right, and the last question here from a patron is from Jonathan Lohman. He asks, "What are your best hopes and deepest fears for the future of X-Wing?"
Well, it's funny. I wouldn't say that I have any major fears for the future of X-Wing. I think if X-Wing can survive a global pandemic, it's going to do great. There's this incredible community. People are so excited to be, playing the game. They're in what is, I don't know, circumstances so bad I couldn't have imagined them a little over a year ago. I mean, I could have, but I wouldn't have because I had no reason to. Nobody thought this year was going to happen, and there's still X-Wing. So I don't know. I'm not saying it's unsinkable, but I think it's in a pretty good place. And I think a lot of that is just, that the fan community is so engaged and enthusiastic, and people want to play, and they're going to find ways to do it. Hopes, I think my biggest hope for X-Wing is just that, as it continues to grow and change, and as the fan community continues to, remain engaged, I just hope it stays, accessible to people again, especially, as we were saying earlier, to people who might have a harder time breaking into it. And that it, maybe even gets better in that regard. So I think that's my biggest hope.
Awesome.
And Max, is there any new projects or things you want that you can or want to share or plug, or we all if you want to just kind of say to everyone your article site and your blog posts you've been doing great. I've enjoyed reading them, by the way. But anything you'd like to share to help plug for future?
I appreciate you asking. I've got a new blog post up today, actually, talking about Candyland and inevitability. So take a look, give it a read. In terms of other projects, I'm doing various freelance things that I, am under NDA for and can't discuss. I'm starting to put together some things for some of my own projects that I hopefully will be able to plug soon, but I'm not quite there yet. I've been, I've been tinkering. Here's one thing I'll plug. I've been tinkering with some fan rules since I am now a fan, for converting an RPG character to an X-Wing pilot. Just some simple little things you can throw together if you wanted to do an X-Wing space battle in place of your, during your RPG session or whatever. So I'll probably put those up sometime in the next month or so, and I'll see what people have to say about those. I don't know. Don't hold me to that next month. We'll see. It's a fan project. It's on its own time schedule.
Well, and anytime you get to that, I'll be looking forward to it, because actually when me and a group of my friends played the Edge of Empire for the first time, we used X-Wing ships as kind of our models that we used when we did the space battle portion of it, which I've always enjoyed DMing for when I get the opportunity. We rotated DMs when we did that, so it was pretty fun usage. But I'd like to see your more structured and fully designed approach to it for sure.
Yeah, don't get your hopes up too much, but take a look. Hopefully it'll be fun.
And then on top of that, when you have your projects, whatever it is, even if obviously it's not going to be X-Wing related, let us know if we can if we can help. You've done a lot for us. You put in a lot of work, and if we could stream a game you designed, you just want to come on and talk about it, hit us up. Let's do it, because we call the people in our community, we call them the fam. You're part of the fam. Okay, so even though you might not be actively working on X-Wing, we got your back. So you just let us know when that time comes.
I appreciate that. I will hold you to that. I am shameless when it comes to self-promotion, so I look forward to it.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. X-Max 3.0?
No, I don't want to design X-wing again. Let's AMG. I wish them the best. It's mostly still my friends there, so like it's a good group of people. I'm sure they'll do a great job, but they can design X-wing 3.0. I don't want to design X-wing again.
Dion, I always am off script, so sorry about this.
Of course, you're my troublemaker. Of course.
Gotta be. So if you had your pick of the litter, if you had to design a miniatures, a card game, or more of like an RPG story based game,
Or a board game. That would be the fourth one. Right, a board game would be the fourth one.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that would be the fourth, like a fourth one.
A Monopoly. A Monopoly. So, or what is it like? Chutes and ladders or something? I forgot the name. But anyway, miniatures, card, dice, or traditional board game. What would be your next phase if you had the pick of the litter?
That's interesting. Well, so I've got a couple RPGs in the pipeline that I'm already working on, actually. I should design more board games because it's a significant part of the space and I should understand it better. But the project I am most excited about that I am not yet working on but have had some vague ideas for is definitely a minis game. I just love minis games. They give me a lot of what I like from RPGs. I've designed a couple RPGs already. I like RPGs a lot. I'm sure I'll do more. I am doing some. I'm sure I'll do more. But minis games, card games, board games, they're all a little more involved on a certain level. And so I'm excited to do another minis game. I think I can take a lot of what I've learned. I think it's very directly applicable. With the board game, it's a more complicated challenge to like translate those skills. One I'm excited to take on sometime. But I don't know. There's a couple things minis game wise I really want to mess around with just from a design perspective. Hopefully people will actually want to play it, but from a design perspective, I'm really excited.
That's cool. Well, you got a captive audience. At least you know that. So once you get like further down the pipeline or further down the development.
Don't worry. I'll be back to bother you.
I'm sure you will. And we'll be happy to have you.
Fantastic. Well, Max, thank you so much for your time. We're going to jump into our episode 200 trivia here in a little bit. You can hang out if you want to, but you don't have to. Things are about to get crazy in here, okay? Things are about to get crazy.
I might take the opportunity to retire for the evening. I'm a little tired because I stayed up too late because of daylight saving time last night. But thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. You'll be getting some more message from me very soon. Very soon.
Definitely. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.